Hello, hello, everyone. I'm Veronica Entwistle. I'm an intuitive and energy counselor, and we're bringing forward today some wonderful beings that we call MIRICRIS. And with the help of Lori Dovey, who's our engineer, all around bon vivant friend and fellow purveyor of what would you call it, spiritual information. Lori, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Do you see what I see?
Probably not, but we're willing to look.
I'm excited to talk to MIRICRIS because it's Christmas and it's also other holidays, but from a Christian standpoint, it's Christmas. And we have some really interesting questions about Mary Magdalene and Jesus to open the show. And fascinating stuff. So, are you ready?
I am ready, yes. Excuse me, clear my throat to make sure it comes through well. So I might like to take a minute to bring MIRICRIS through. We are here and we are so ready to speak with all of you. Not just about Mary Magdalene and Christ, but also to speak of the Christing energy that is what you're lauding at this time with Christmas trees and all, is you're lauding the building up of this very wonderful frequency, which is all over the world. You could say emanating from the manger. But more than that, we're saying that it has very much installed itself for access around the world. This is so important to us because it has helped many people become well. It's helped many people to become conscious. And ideally, humanity is becoming a conscious species. And one of the greatest gifts, and not the only gift, but one of the greatest gifts that have come through is through the Christing process, through the manger, through Mary, and those beings who are very highly placed in history, bringing through with a great deal of difficulty, you might say, much higher frequencies. You are frequency beings. We know many of you know that. You are frequency beings, but what Christmas has truly done was to even just if we have some people who deny that it was real, but we say to you, even the fact that many people are focusing on it makes it real. It's very, very interesting. It makes it real and expansive, and that human beings all over the world have gained access to higher consciousness, more choices in their own healing. It's been very, very powerful. And it's one of the things we want to say is it never stops. The influence of the Christing which is the downloading of these incredible frequencies. It's moving through humanity still, sometimes with much more heightened speed. And it certainly has brought human intelligence. Now, you might doubt this if you watch your news all the time, but it's brought human intelligence to a much higher place. Not just intelligence, but emotional empathy and rapport. And what we say to this one in our channelings is remind yourself that not everyone is enjoying the idea of raising their fields and frequency. But we're saying to you that assuredly, probably 30% of the population is very, very interested in, they may not call it raising their fields and frequency, but we call it, or they call it, evolving, becoming a much more self-designing and supportive, and we'll call it Christian. This is the Christianity part of it, the religious part of it isn't the only place that the Christing the movement of the energy through humanity is going through even those who are not what would we call Christian. You see, it's an energy fields, and we say that that the energy will continue to rise. And those of you who are listening, who are interested in doing this, can make yourself physically, mentally, and emotionally conscious of raising the amount of the Christing energy that you have in your body mind, which just facilitates greater, what would we call it? Understanding, forgiveness, heart possibilities, to be able to love, to be able to heal. It moves through humanity at a similar level, even for those people who are not particularly interested in Christianity, as it is called in a, what would you say, doctrinary way. Many people don't want the doctrines, they're afraid of them. However, this doctrine, if that's what we're going to call it, holds this amazing, it doesn't hold, it designs this amazing, uplifting frequency assortments that move through people. One of the things we want to say is that people choose it as well. For those of you who are watching this show and listening to this show, we want to say if you drop inside yourself, down to the perineum is one of the best places to go for where your entire central nervous system interacts with your evolution. If you go into there, drop inside there, and draw up some of the Christing energy, however you perceive that, draw it up, move it through yourself. You will find you get great boosts of possibility. It's inspiring. The word inspiring is a very fascinating word because it means inspire, creating this huge updraft of energy. So we're saying that no matter what religion people belong to, the energy that is all over the world now, thanks to this particular festivity, is moving through by choice. Many, many people. Again, we're saying perhaps 30%, perhaps 90%. We don't know that, but we know that ready to help themselves is about 30%. So we're saying to you, you have some questions, Lori, and we're very happy to respond to your questions.
Thank you, MIRICRIS. Since my time here in France now, it has been a fascination of mine as I discovered the Mary Magdalene, who is a very revered saint here in France. And there's quite a bit of documentation that she died here in France, and not far from where I'm at. She died in Saint-Baume, France, and she lived in a cave for the last 30 years of her life. I guess that's a place where I'd like to begin. We know Mary Magdalene was Jesus's right-hand woman. She's somebody who's mentioned more times in the Bible than the apostles themselves. So can we
Interestingly, she had very bad press a lot of the time, didn't she?
Well, yeah, she was slandered by the Roman Catholic Church by calling her a prostitute. And the Pope has now reputed that, and that is no longer the case of what's believed. But a question for you, MIRICRIS, if you can tap into her, if that's possible, did I guess let's start with something simple. Did she live in a cave for the last 30 years of her life?
Yes, perhaps not 30, but certainly she had it started off being a kind of a hiding place and became a niche for her. And that was absolutely, it saved her, what would you call it, her sanity?
Yeah, I would imagine.
She had such tremendous faith in the Christing, and but she was very, very, as is often the case, is people who are this highly sensitive will lose their mental psychological balance at times, and she had a big struggle with that. But her niche in her cave was very, very important to her. We want to add another thing is if you looked at her body mind and the way it's constructed, and the nervous system that she has, is her nervous system was built. You some people that you know have this as well, but was built or arranged in such a way as it could accommodate that some of the higher frequencies that we were talking about, the Christing frequencies. She had a nervous system that not only accommodated that, but also incorporated it in her body mind. So she literally radiated at a very, very intense level and helped many others. But she had periods of being blinded by the pain and suffering that she'd been through. And that's all right. You do understand that, do you not?
And part of, yes, and part of how she got to France was because she was Christian. She was expelled from Palestine. And she and the apostles, and perhaps even Jesus, and this is something I want to get into, is unveiling the truth behind world events, which is there's a good possibility that she arrived in a makeshift boat with the apostles, again, not far from here along the coast where she ended up living in the cave. I'd like to know if she made this journey with, in fact, Jesus and the apostles.
We're not getting a very clear answer regarding this, but what we are very, very clear about is that she has she embodies the Christ frequency. You understand that? The Christ energy. She embodies that. And several of the boat is real. And several of the apostles that were in that boat with her were incorporating that same energy within them. And the hatred for these people was beyond your wildest dreams. You understand that? So she suffered terribly, having great boats of evolution coming through her. We call it evolution, but really it's the incorporation, becoming an embodiment of these very, very high frequencies. You understand that? But that means that she did drop out of the ability to cope with life off and on. It was quite a challenge for her. And two of the apostles also did that, but they were quite, what would you say? They would honor this, we'll call it nervous breakdown or insanity, whatever you want to call it. They would honor it, knowing full well it had a great deal to do with the expansion that came from the rapport with Christ. So yes, she came across with, we don't see Jesus in that particular boat.
Okay.
But she came across with his, we'll put it this way, his energy, his the kind of energy that he was here to share. You understand that? And it makes us feel a deep, deep emotional place, which bonds things like despair with incredible expansion. You understand? Then despair has to come up. So you must understand that she and they had to go through some very big adjustments on their existence as human beings.
Right. Now, she was the first historically documented to have seen the quote unquote resurrection of Christ. And there is also possible lore, possible evidence that he was actually taken down off the cross, hidden and healed, and eventually they fled.
He was hidden and healed by the women, was he not? We're seeing that.
Right. So my question is, was he in fact taken down? That this idea of the Roman
Yes, he
Catholic
was.
Church
Mm.
painting this grandiose picture of him dying on the cross for our sins was not in fact what happened. What we're trying to get clarification on, MIRICRIS, is was he taken down, hidden, and healed, and then eventually fled?
Yes.
Wow. Yeah, so this resurrection of Christ was a fabrication
Except that
of,
this one also had a Catholic upbringing and was taught that he was taken down and healed.
sure, sure. But as we know, the Roman Catholic Church made up then the resurrection of Christ, when in fact what really happened was he disappeared after the healing, after his healing, like you say, through the women. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Um, just a moment. We're seeing, one moment here, that he was taken down and he was healed. And there were 3 women in there, perhaps 4. And then he was well enough to be to start to travel. You understand that? The healing was
Mhm.
very miraculous. Do you know that?
Yes.
And so the resurrection, if you're ever very poetic, you know you could take that word and change it in 50,000 ways. You understand that? So the
Right.
resurrection is he moved on from there. And
Right.
several people found that out, you know,
Ri-
as sometimes the resurrection is described as this absolutely flamboyant presentation of a healed body, but we're not seeing that.
No, it was a politicalization of the time and the use of this man for the church and Pontius Pilate to come to power once again. And here's a question for you: Did Mary have a
He was
child
a
named?
bad man, Pontius Pilate.
Yeah, very, huh?
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Now, did Mary have a child named Sarah? Did she have a baby? Did she have a child?
There was a child. We do not see it as hers, but we see that there was a child who was very advanced as a spirit being and was very much a part of that group. There was a group of women that bonded together. You know that.
Uh-huh. And apparently there's something called the Three Marys. It was Mary Magdalene, Mother Mary of Jesus, and apparently the sister, if I'm not mistaken, of Mother Mary, whose name was also Mary. It's just kind of interesting. But there were these three Marys, apparently, who were very influential.
Influential is a very good word because many people do not think they had any influence in those days, but they
Uh-huh.
had.
Yeah.
Um, Jesus' mother was a very, as you probably already know, she was a very, very compassionate. Um, she had a great deal of the intuitive in her, you know that? And
Mm-hmm.
she knew at the beginning of her giving birth
Mm-hmm.
to Jesus that it was going to be very difficult for her as a
Right.
mother. And that.
Yes. Yeah.
But she also was willing because she knew what the sacrifice would bring.
Mm-hmm. And this leads me to, since we're along this line of communication, what did Jesus and Mary Magdalene get married? Were they in fact together?
We would say yes, but there's a different way of being. For example, when you say get married, there's a kind of a style that is evoked by a phrase like that.
I
Jesus. was about his father's business, and you know that. He could not um, be that invested in his marriage relationship. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Right. What I mean by that is that they were, in fact, together. They loved each other and they were intimately together.
Yes, but we say it wasn't always like that.
No, of course not.
But the love which you can feel from Jesus now, the love was real and just kept growing and growing. And the fact that he and she needed one another to um, go through, we already mentioned that, for example, Mary Magdalene went through some very deep psychological difficulties. And
Mm-hmm.
part of it is the destruction and the pain that was distributed in and around her. And they helped each other through those kinds of experiences. But
Mm,
Jesus had a great deal to do on the planet. You know that.
right. And
He
did
did
he,
too, and they had it in different directions often.
right. And did he make it to France?
Yes, but we don't see that he stayed very much,
Right.
mostly because he was not staying anywhere very much.
No, he spent a long time in India.
Yes.
Is that true?
Hmm.
Yeah.
And he seeded, wherever he went, he seeded a certain vibrational consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
That was his job, if you will. To say he had one job is really naive, isn't it? But he
Mm,
did travel to bring. No, it's like humans have these evocative areas. If you can evoke it a right way, it wakes up. You know that. So he was spending time and spending travels. Um, we say dust in his sandals for evoking that awakening in people all around the world. And sometimes Mary was not with him, but sometimes she was.
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then, since he did not die on the cross, where can you get a sense of where and how he died and how that happened?
It seems like he died in the eastern part of not France, but moving east into the countries that were there just a little farther east. He died
Mm,
in there as some kind of spiritual teacher, builder.
mm,
We want to use the term guru, which isn't exactly appropriate for his time and space. But
mm-hmm,
you were right, he was living on that, that part of Europe, Eastern
mm-hmm,
Europe,
mm-hmm,
and became resident in several of those places. He also made sure or kept in touch with Mary Magdalene very often.
wow.
They had what would you call it? A very deep commitment to one another's purpose.
Mm-hmm,
See, and that's what was fueled over and over again between them from
mm,
Egypt, from those areas, and then over to the Europe,
right.
France, along Eastern.
Wow. There's a lot of information people don't know about because it's a whole different story when he didn't die on the cross. You know.
But I
So,
think many people know that already.
I don't know. I know many Christians who are very religious who believe he died on the cross for our sins.
But you understand that many people hold their spiritual beliefs with a very tight packaging. You
Yeah,
understand? And what
yeah,
we're saying, the Christ that we're seeing here is someone whose packaging had to be moved constantly to have different ways of expressing itself. You see, he
yeah.
had, he was the seed, what would you call it? He was Johnny Appleseed. of consciousness to a degree. You understand that? And he
Yeah,
couldn't, even with his relationship with Mary Magdalene, he couldn't stay in one place. He couldn't.
right. And
That would have that would have thrown his job into a tizzy. You understand?
yes. And here's a really profound question. I don't know, MIRICRIS, if you can speak to this, but if we were to look into the soul of Jesus, as we often look into different souls, different past lives, is it too much to ask who some of his other past lives before he incarnated as Jesus?
Um, that would take quite a bit of time. It's not too much to ask, but it's very intricate because
Yeah.
some of it is there's a reluctance about bringing that forward,
Mhm.
mostly because what people do with that kind of information. I'm getting a strong, you don't want to distract. It's big enough for some people to think he died on the cross, but now you're saying he didn't actually. That's a very big jump because some of this doctrine is
Mhm.
is religious. You understand that?
Oh, it's political. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes. And it's very difficult. We see a number of lifetimes that he had, all of which was to accrue or integrate a different, what would you call it, different weavings of wisdom. Very
Mhm.
interesting, different weaving of
Wow.
wisdom. And
Interesting.
for us to be trying to track down a stabilizing force here, there, and everywhere seems anathema to what his message to us today is, which is he was a distributor, a big distributor,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
continues to be so today, if you understand that.
Hmm.
And Mary Magdalene has her own version, and her ability to come apart and go, what would you call it, be broken in spirit and so on, in order to grow and expand. That
Yeah.
that isn't to be denigrated or mocked either. Do you understand that? That was a really big
Yeah.
gift she gave to the planet because as she broke open, there were many others who could open and follow an absolute changing of the core of the nucleus of a human being, especially a woman in those days. The
Hmm.
woman's nucleus is different than the male. Perhaps you know that. And it's a very blessed journey that she was on.
Hmm. Hmm.
And right, she and Jesus were very well, I want to say melded together, but it wasn't because they weren't stuck together physically.
No, I
They were
understand.
vibrating in such a way as to keep each other growing and
Yeah.
safe and
Hmm.
heard.
Yeah.
Understand?
Yeah. And just to close this particular topic, so Mary's remains are in a church in Saint Maximin,
Okay.
in Saint-Baume. You can see her skull for anybody
Mm.
who comes to France. And apparently the walk up there is astounding, and her cave is also up on the hill there. So just some information.
Have you been there?
No, but it's certainly on my list now, where I have been and
It's
hardly.
very interesting. Just one moment, please. It's very interesting that her skull itself has a great deal of the frequency, even to this day, from
Ah,
those times and the consciousness that she shared with Jesus.
yeah. Where I have been is down in the southwest of France, near um, Rennes-les-Bonnes. I have been to the waters. It's called the Fountain of Love in English, but it's in French. Um, and apparently, this was a place where Mary would do baptisms.
Oh, wonderful.
And the energy of this place is, I don't know if it's true, and I'd like to ask you if that's true. Um, but the energy of the place is astounding. And I'm sending you the vision now.
Well, we're saying immediately, of course it is, because even her skull
Mhm.
is absolutely radiating. It is very, very life-changing for anyone who gets close to it. So what
Wow.
you're saying is not a surprise. It's part of her healing force. Everyone
Yes.
has a healing force, you know that.
Mhm.
But some people who have a higher essential frequency have a stronger one. And it's something for us all to aim for, really.
Right. Now, MIRICRIS, can we go on to another topic
Sure. Mm-hmm.
about um, how can we do this in this life on this planet, embodied in this body? Can we um, set our sights on who we want to be in the spirit world when we die? Can
Oh
we,
my.
yeah, can we be a guardian angel? Can we be a spirit guide? Can we be a walk-in? Or what are some of the other forms to consider?
You can. You can choose what it is you want to be, but we want to ask you, uh, uh, all right. The question that we throw back at you, Lori, is that if a person is becoming more Christed, more realized, more, it's not talking only about religions, it's that incredible frequency that we call the Christing, you see? And that if you have that and you're cultivating that and cultivating that and cultivating that, when you pass through, you're going to have that to share with others. And you could make many decisions on how to embody that or what kind of identity you want to use. It doesn't matter. But there are some people, well, in this one's experience, there's some people who pass through, and if they come near, she feels weighted down. Other people who go through and they come near, and there's an incredible expansion. And we're saying to you, if you want to make that kind of decision, be sure that you are building the frequency, awakening the potential frequencies in your body mind, bringing in universal frequencies that are new, and so on, so that when you pass over, that's what's left of you in many ways, is this incredible um, what would we call it, this sort of all these frequencies that are contained in your core, but they're not really given a persona or a shape as much as they are a very successful response to the consciousness you applied to your journey in this life. So you could call yourself a teacher, you could call yourself a Saint Germainer, or you see, it doesn't matter, but we're saying that the ideal inside is that you've taken charge of choosing the higher frequency energies that you want to weave into your essence. Does that make sense to you?
Mhm, mhm.
So we
Yeah,
go
and
back to Magdalene's skull, and she has it throughout her entire being. You see?
mm, mm.
Do you have any
Yeah,
more questions?
yeah, it's just this is so deep. It's just amazing. I feel I just feel the energy um, of of what we're talking about on a very deep, profound level.
Good. We like that.
So I think this show has been very focused on spirituality, and I think in not so much politics, but I think another question in the spiritual realm is how do plants and trees interact with each other? What
We
type
want
of
to do an interception first. When you're talking about politics, we want to say very quickly a little intrusion, which is um, your politicians. There are a few of them who pay attention to the frequencies that they put into the world. But you know
ah,
what? They'd win an awful lot more votes if they did that. You see? All right.
wow.
Now you would like to, and we're being partially cheeky saying that because many
I
people,
know. Is there anybody you want to name?
No, not at this point. That'd take a
Okay.
whole different subject, wouldn't it?
Okay.
Because
Yes, it
you're
would.
asking about plants, and the plants,
I'm asking, how do plants and trees interact with each other? What
yeah,
type,
vibrationally, they can hear
what
each other.
type of frequencies do they emit? And how do they send and receive information?
How do they send?
And
Uh,
receive information to
through
each
their
other?
consciousness. It's really through their consciousness. You already know this. You feel really good around some plants. And they say that some plants, I was just reading this the other day, some plants know if you're in a state of distress and yet you're visiting somebody else, they get distressed at your home.
Mm-hmm.
So they have a tremendous communication going on. Not all plants are evocative like that. Not all people are either, and you know that. So we smile and say, yeah, they're picking up messages a lot. And you have a great number of trees and so on. Um, in this part of the world, we're talking about British Columbia area, that we're saying that those trees, for example, are grieving deeply. They're being starved of water and starved of all kinds of support. And they grieve back and forth and communicate with one another about it. Do you understand?
Mm. Mm. Mm.
Some of that could be changed, but if you are walking through a forest and you see trees suffering, speak to them, love them, tell them things, you know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And these frequencies that they emit, they without getting too scientific, I guess. At what can you speak to the types of frequencies that they're emitting?
Uh, no, that's very complicated, and that would take a long time. And we're feeling that the time for this discussion is ending fairly soon. But that would be a whole show that we could do. It'd be
Okay,
very, very interesting.
that
And
would be
also, it would help people direct. Is like you want to direct music, you want to
good.
direct thoughts. We could
Mhm.
help people direct amongst trees and flowers and so on, some very healing energies. There are some people that know how to do this already, but that's a
Yeah.
very interesting subject.
Okay. I'd love to do this in the future. We'll set aside some time to focus on this whole topic. Maybe we'll even do a workshop with MIRICRIS on this.
Wonderful.
Yeah. And how about the last question, which is political, and it's more to help put people's minds at ease because there's such a hoodwinking going on. Mary Chris, can you talk about these drones? This is our last question. Um,
Pretty hefty question, isn't it?
maybe not, maybe so. What is their purpose? Who's controlling them? And yeah, can you speak to
There
this?
is a great deal of subterfuge under parts of it. Do you understand that? And there's checks and balances trying to be made. You could call it from our side, which we doubt is as pure as you might like to think it is,
Mhm.
and that there is some damaging activity being done, and that some of the drones are out to find out where that is. It's nu- it's nuclear in a way, isn't it?
Mhm.
It's not as bad as it could be, but it's very, very vicious. And parts of it are out to, parts of the drone business is out to neutralize some of that and help it. But the radiation is spreading of its own, and it brings us to tears because there's been some imposition of toxic radiation by nefarious people. We would say Russia is part of it, but there are several other countries that are a part of that. One of them might be North Korea. You understand? You've got these little consortiums of disruption that are
Mhm.
in different parts of the world. However, we are saying on the uplifting note that it appears that the discovery is being made of how to get to the central core of it. And it can be healed.
Great. Okay, so
Part of
this,
the problem is you cannot trust the leaders of this world at this time to really
right.
work toward the higher good. Do you understand?
Yes, yes.
But we're going back into, first of all, Mary Magdalene had to come apart in order to become even more expanded, you see?
Mhm. Mhm.
And many people are having to come apart in order to get strong enough and wise enough to do um, what's taken to what will be needed to grab hold of the integrity which is shriveling amongst leaders and turn it. Do you understand? This is a big joke,
Right.
but
So
it's
it, sorry, MIRICRIS. It is the drones any way connected to uh, doing surveillance on
oh yes. There
the
are
well
several kinds of drones.
on
What
the election on the data processing centers?
yes, you know that. There's some, yes. The way the machines have been used, and so on and so forth. It's very easy for them to perceive in there where there's been disruption. However, as we said to you before, it's pretty hard to define one malevolent force. There are
Mhm.
several, and
Mhm.
it's pretty hard to cage them or define them. However, we do think that February, maybe even before that, that there will be a lot more resolution in this and people will understand. The people who care will, yes, because many people are afraid, will understand what can be done to ameliorate the poison, the toxicity.
Okay.
And when you hear that, listen, because one of the things that you have to do with this media, the way it's going these days, is listen with every nerve fiber.
Mhm.
Ooh, this turns my stomach. Ooh, this gives me a headache. Whatever it is that's like that, pay attention and put that over on the shelf as a malevolent force, you see, and you'll find yourself able to walk through a very sometimes crippling number of influences in order to get a clearer path. We believe that humanity is evolving at this time, and the birth canal is really painful, but
Mhm.
humanity has to evolve enough to say, get away. I'm not having this anymore. I'm not having that anymore. It has to get really, really strong and it
Right.
will come from inside. But we
And
thank
be
you so much for giving us the opportunity to express ourselves.
certainly, thank you, MIRICRIS, for being here, spending the time on such deep subjects. And we'll continue next week.
Yes, thank you.
All
Thanks
right.
to everyone listening.
All right. Everybody, if you'd like to get a reading with Veronica, you can see the information down below in the description box, and we'll get back to you. Okay.
Thanks, Lori.
Bye-bye.
I know.
Bonsoir.
Bonsoir.